Hey, I'm Geeky Pastimes and welcome to the first of the Rambling Reviews. This is a new series that I'm trying out just where I wanted to get into doing some game reviews and things like that, but I'm not trying to find some objective way of reviewing games. I'm just going to talk about the games that I've played, talk about games that I've finished or played a bunch of, and then let you know what I think of them. If you like the videos, don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments if you want to see more of this and what other games that you've seen me playing that maybe you think I should do a review of. I'm not necessarily going to do reviews as soon as the game comes out because I want to have time to play it and everything like that. So I'm happy to take suggestions for older games too. So today's review is going to be all about Deathloop, and I finished this last night. Now, just as a warning, even though I put it in the thumbnail and I put it in the title, there's going to be loads of spoilers in this. I'm going to talk about the whole story because I think it's important to talk about how good the game is in terms of the story of Deathloop, because it changed my opinion of it quite a lot when I got towards the end of it. So for anyone who doesn't know, very quick summary, Deathloop is a new game by Arcane, the people who made Dishonored and Prey. It's got a lot of similarities with those games, so it's a first-person shooter that's in a kind of open world that sort of has levels, and you have lots of abilities and things like that, so it's not just shooting, there's lots of kind of cool movement and sort of almost platforming and stuff like that, which is a lot of fun. And the idea behind the game is that you're stuck in this death loop, and to get out of it you need to kill this group of people who are called visionaries, and then if you can kill them all in the same day, then you'll be able to break out of the loop and finish the game. Now, all of that sounds very cool, and when I first started playing Deathloop, I was really enjoying myself. Like, the world looks really cool, the characters are a lot of fun, the voice acting is absolutely amazing. I think they did a really good job of that, especially the two main characters, Colt and Juliana. Like, they're really well done, like, they're a lot of fun to listen to. It does start to grate a bit, and I think everyone sort of thought this was going to happen. Once you get a few hours in, you start hearing the same interactions again and again, you start hearing the same voice lines, and this isn't to do with the narrative of the loop, because these two characters actually remember everything, so they're not kind of stuck repeating the same thing in the same way. So it just seems, you know, a little bit weird, and I think this is the problem of a lot of Deathloop, is that it constantly hits against the limitations of being a game. And what I mean by that is, when you're playing some games, you can kind of immerse yourself into it and follow the story and think about it in terms of a story, in terms of a world, things like that. When you're playing some games though, you're constantly reminded that you're just playing a video game and that there's limits of the video game and there's rules of the video game. And I think that's normally where I start to lose interest in games a little bit, especially sort of narrative-based games. So a really good example of that for me is World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft I can have a lot of fun in when I think like I'm a sort of adventurer and I'm leveling up and getting more powerful and I'm exploring the world and interacting with people. As soon as my brain switches to the mode where it's like, oh, I'm trying to make these numbers go up so then I can do a different type of content where more numbers will go up, and I realise I'm just stuck in this loop where the numbers don't mean anything and I'm essentially working to make a sort of spreadsheet of numbers fill up, that's when I lose interest. And with Deathloop, it's almost like a similar thing, that I hit this point a few hours in, I'd say probably 4 or 5 hours in, where I sort of saw through the game and saw how it was working and what it was asking me to do. And I started losing interest a little bit. Now, I carried on because I kind of had it in my head that there was going to be some way that the game would change things up, that there was going to be some shift in the game at some point, something that would change the way I was doing things or change the story dramatically. And in my opinion, that never really happened. So the way you play through the game, you start off and you're sort of very underpowered, you don't have many guns or anything like that, you don't have any of the sort of special abilities, and then you get all of those things by going around exploring the world and killing the visionaries in loops, and then you can get some of their abilities, some of their guns, and you can find guns in the world and stuff like that. And then you can save them, you can like save some of this stuff ready for future loops. And early on it makes a big deal of that like, oh, you need this precious resource in order to be able to, I think it's called Residium, in order to be able to save all of these things, to infuse things so you'll keep them for future loops. But what happens quite quickly is you get a lot of really good stuff early on and then you never want to use anything else. You can only hold 3 weapons at a time and you can only hold 2 abilities at a time, as in when you go into a world, because there's like 4 levels, there's 4 sort of little worlds, and you can choose what time of day you go into them. There's 4 times a day and 4 worlds. And when you go into them, you choose your loadout. So say, a lot of the time I'd be like, okay, I'm going to take Blink because it's super useful to get away. I forgot what it's actually called, but it like lets you teleport forwards, just like you could with Blink in Dishonored. And then I'll take the thing that makes me go invisible, Ether, because that's super useful. That lets me be invisible whenever I want, and that's really good if you're trying to stealth stuff, obviously. And then the weapons, like I ended up getting a silenced SMG that was really good. I ended up getting this ridiculously powerful pistol that would fire a gas cloud that would also explode, that could kill entire groups of enemies without a problem. And then sometimes, you know, I'd take another gun, like a machine gun or something, but I never really used it. And then I just I had all of the stuff I wanted, and that happened, like I said, quite early on in the game. It was like 4 or 5 hours in, and it only took me 8, I think it was nearly 9 hours to complete the game. So I finished a whole game in 9 hours, and like 4 or 5 hours in, I was at the point where I'd already got all of the stuff that I ended up using for the rest of the game. So when I was in the game, I wasn't really bothering to explore to find better weapons or trying to kill visionaries to get slabs or anything like that. A lot of the time I'd kill the visionaries and not even pick up stuff. You can get upgrades and stuff, but I'd already filled out some of the upgrades that I wanted. So yeah, it got to the point where it's like, okay, now I've got everything that I need. That side of the game isn't really interesting anymore, getting like new equipment. Instead, all I'm trying to do is complete the quests, complete the way to kill the visionaries. And when this game was first announced, I think, like a lot of people, I thought that it was going to be this sort of game where you had to work out a way to kill the visionaries. And maybe it'd be like Hitman, where you'd have like a kind of semi-open world, and you'd have loads of different ways to do all of your objectives, loads of different ways to complete the same thing, and it would be almost like a sandbox to find the best way that works for you. It's not really like that. Like, there is a sandbox element in terms of how you kill a few of the visionaries. There's like a few different people who... Okay, there are opportunities where you could snipe them from a long way away, or you could go up close to them and stealth them and kill them, or you can just run around blasting. But the game very, very specifically tells you how to do everything. Like, it's a very linear quest, really, that has a few bits where you can do them in any order you want, but essentially, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're just going to do all of them eventually. And it tells you exactly what to do. So it tells you the best way to kill all of the visionaries. When you've completed all of the quests about learning how to kill each visionary, then it actually comes up with a quest at the end that tells you step by step how to kill all of the visionaries in one day. So it kind of takes that power away from you, where you thought that you were going to be working out how to do this. You'd be like coming up with your own clever solution for it. But really, the game has come up, the designers have already come up with their own clever solution for it. And you just do that. You just do what they told you to. It feels a lot like following a YouTube guide. Like, it feels like following a guide that's telling you how to do something, and you're just like constantly checking the steps. Now, when I finished the game, I actually finished it a tiny bit earlier than I was meant to, because there was one quest I hadn't finished where it was meant to be like, how do you kill Alexis? And I knew how to do it, I just couldn't be bothered to actually do it. So I went and did the final day without having that quest that tells you step by step how to do everything. And I think I enjoyed that possibly a little bit more, like, because I was like checking my notes and going and doing stuff, and like trying to remember how things worked so I could go and kill all of them. And then when I did it, because I actually did that final quest in the last day as well, then it gave me this quest where it's like, oh, this is how it should have happened. I should have had literally a waypoint telling me where to go everywhere, reminders of all of the codes that you need to put in, all of that stuff. It was all laid out for you, and I think that's really stupid, like, for this sort of game. I think that really ruins the sort of spirit of the game and like what it's marketed as. It's definitely sold as a kind of very open, interesting sort of puzzle type game, but it's much more of a linear first-person shooter, and it's not a difficult one either. Like, the enemy stealth like mechanics is super easy to get them to lose you, especially when you've got like invisibility and teleporting and stuff like that. Like, if you get seen, it's not hard at all to get away. The AI is fairly stupid and don't have many abilities, so when you're fighting them, it's very, very easy to just find a room that only has one entrance and then just keep mowing them down as they come in. Like, that's super easy to do. There's not a problem at all. So it's like you end up breaking the game to the point where there's no threat, and there's no difficulty levels or anything like that. There's nothing that makes it harder for you. Unless you wanted to sort of like, you know, hamstring yourself by choosing to do a rubbish weapon, or deciding you wanted to do everything without killing any innocents, which I think is one of the achievements. Stuff like that could, I suppose, provide a bit of challenge. Now, so that sort of side of it was disappointing. I think the gameplay became disappointing. And the other thing, like, the thing that I expected to enjoy a lot about it, like the abilities and moving around and all of that sort of stuff, it was fun. But I wouldn't say it was as good as Dishonored, which is strange because it's the same development studio, and it's like all of the cool stuff you can do in this, like the teleporting and linking people together with Nexus, all of that, and the stealth and everything, all of that stuff was in Dishonored, and I think it was better in Dishonored. I think it was more interesting in Dishonored. So it's kind of a shame that in this game it's just like, oh, Dishonored, but with a few things taken away. Like, that seems to be a little bit annoying. And similarly with the level design, I think there's a reason that in a lot of the marketing they showed off Updam a lot, which is like the town, the city. And that's because that's by far the most interesting location. Like that one seems really fleshed out. There's loads of buildings that open at different times of day. There's things that happen there in the morning. If you change what happens in the morning, that changes the way the map is in the afternoon and the evening. Stuff like that is very, very cool. It looks awesome. There's like loads of really cool stuff in there. It's a really cool area to explore. The other 3 areas aren't anywhere near as exciting. Like, there's one that has this kind of big club that you only really need to go there once, but there's like nothing really inside it to look at. There's nothing very interesting inside it. And the rest of it is just this sort of like snowy wilderness with some like little bits of military bases and stuff. There's another one which is a big snowy place with a load of military bases and stuff, and you know how much I hate military bases. So like those 2 areas end up being quite similar. And then there's another one that's meant to be this sort of like Baytown area with some hangars and stuff, and that whole area feels like it's really disconnected from everything else. It feels very much like there's a lot of ideas in there, but none of them are fleshed out. There's like loads of single rooms where it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and then there's nothing more to it, which is a real shame. Now, if you want to get into like the lore and completing every side mission and finding every little thing, there are some cool things. Like there's some cool little puzzles and challenges, like the spy radio thing was really good. There's a few things that are really interesting like that, dotted about. But it really is a few. It's like, I would say there's probably 3 or 4 interesting things like that. It's not like every building you go into has some interesting mystery or something to solve, or some really interesting story attached to it. Again, like I think Dishonored did that side of things a little bit better, like that was more fun. Now the big gameplay thing that I haven't spoken about so far is the Juliana interaction. So the idea that you are constantly at threat of being invaded by a real player playing as Juliana who will come and try to ruin your day. And that is kind of explained in the narrative why that's happening. You know, the idea that she is just enjoying killing you. Like she enjoys killing, she's enjoying going through this loop and being able to kill you with no consequence and stuff like that. All of that stuff kind of makes sense within the story, but in terms of gameplay, it was really good fun for the first day the game was live. So on launch day, everyone was about the same. Everyone was slowly like learning the maps. Everyone was getting new weapons and new abilities and stuff like that. And then it was fun. When you had a Juliana come in, it was exciting. Obviously what happened, because it happens with every game, people decided to like try and work out what the meta would be. People tried to work out what the sort of best theories would be for how to kill people, and they found the best weapons for it. Like that pistol that I was talking about that fires the gas clouds is insanely strong. They worked out what are the best abilities to use for it, and then when's the best time to attack people, like where's the best place to hide and stuff like that. So then Juliana's became incredibly powerful and incredibly scary, to the point where it's just kind of frustrating to play against, because there's not that much variety, because either they're super easy to beat and you either never see them because they don't find you, or you just kill them straight away, or they're these people who have been doing it again and again and again, because what's happened is they finished the main game quite quickly. Like I said, I finished it in like 9 hours, and I'm not particularly good at games. They finished that game really quickly, and then all they've got left is to play as Juliana, to go and invade other people's games. So that's exactly what they've been doing over and over again, to the point where they get insanely good at it. So now it's not that much fun to play when a Juliana invades. It's like they're either going to be terrible or they're going to be insanely good, and then you're going to lose any progress you had on that mission because you're just getting absolutely destroyed by the stupid pistol with the gas clouds. And I don't think there's that much the developers can do about it. Like, there's not much they can do in the way of balance that would make it more interesting, that would also make it fair. I think it's just the nature of it that, like, it's a very limited single player game, and then when everyone moves over to the multiplayer, the best players are going to be the ones who are playing as Juliana, and they're just going to be essentially griefing the people who are playing through the main story because they're going to be newer, which is a real shame. You can do stuff like, if you want to make it so you're just playing against your friends, you can do that, so you can just play against friends, but it's not a particularly interesting like deathmatch type game, especially because one of you will only have 1 life and the other person has 3 lives. That kind of ruins things. And also, because of the power of some of the weapons, there's not that many reasons to be very stealthy as Juliana. There's not many reasons to set up ambushes. It's not like the amazing Splinter Cell Spies vs. Merc stuff, where, you know, there's a really good reason as the spies to try and be as sneaky as possible. That doesn't really exist in this. Instead, it just turns into this very quick deathmatch of people blasting each other until one of you's dead, and that's it. I think what a lot of people have done now, if you're starting the campaign, is just set it to offline modes. Then you play as Juliana as a bot. She's slightly more capable than the AI, than the sort of NPC characters, the normal characters. So like it's a little bit of extra threat and it's a little bit unpredictable. But when I was finishing it off, I didn't want to be interrupted on the last mission, so I put it on solo mode. I didn't have Juliana invade at all for like the last 2 hours of the game. I think I didn't have any invasions at all, which is a real shame. And often when like I did get invaded by players, because I was playing quite early on, I didn't ever see them. Like they just didn't like they invaded the game. I'd already done on the map what I needed to do, so I just went to the exit. They never found me. So yeah, that sort of whole feature kind of falls flat on its face. The last thing that I want to have a little bit of a moan about, because I know this is a very negative review, but it's partly just to balance out all of the 10 out of 10 reviews. Like, there are things that are good about this game. Obviously, it's an arcane game. It's going to be really good. It looks really good. Like, the gameplay is pretty good. Like, in terms of how you move and how you shoot and everything like that is interesting. The voice acting's good, like I said. But the other big negative is the story. Like, the story is I think with games, there's always like set narrative. So not just with games, with films, TV, movies, everything, books, everything. And there's like different types of narratives. You'd have like quest narratives where you're going and doing something. Something like Zelda ends up being like a quest narrative game. You have some interesting ones like revenge narratives, like Last of Us, which I think worked really, really well. And I think Last of Us Part 2 was one of the best games of last generation, if not the best game of last generation. And then you have like these sort of mystery box games, which I'd say, you know, this is a bit like the TV shows like Lost and stuff like that, where it's like the idea is you're trying to discover something, you're trying to find out a mystery, trying to find out what's in the box. And the whole game sort of revolves around you solving that mystery, and then once you solve it, that's going to kind of be the solution. And in Deathloop, it sets up a ton of mysteries and then doesn't really explain many of them at all. So as you're playing through the game, you end up sort of wanting to know things about like, who is Juliana? And you do kind of get that explained to you a little bit. Why you're stuck in a loop, that's kind of explained in terms of like, it's magic. And then you get a few more things, sort of like, who is this, like, who's Operation Horizon or Project Horizon or whatever they're called. And you have things about like, why there's so many cults about, why there's so many Julianas about, what are the slabs going on, what are the slabs doing. And all of the solutions to all of these mysteries are either really uninteresting, like really just not an interesting solution. So like, again, spoilers, like really heavy spoilers from this point on. So if you're still listening and you think, okay, I've heard enough, I don't want to know actually what the solutions to all these puzzles are, stop listening now. But yeah, so the solution, you know, who Juliana is, it's Colt's daughter. That just makes it creepy when he was like saying that he thought he was in a relationship with her and stuff like that, and there's like a few creepy lines throughout the whole story. But it doesn't end up being like something that like explains a whole bunch. Why are there so many Colts and Julianas? Never really explained. I've even been researching on like the subreddits and stuff like that to try and work out if someone's figured out what's going on with that, and it's just like, yeah, no, it doesn't really make sense. The whole universe and why it's going on, it's like why this time loop's happening, seems to be kind of connected to the Dishonored universe a little bit, and that would be kind of more interesting, I think, if they made it a more important part of the story. But it just feels kind of like tacked on that, like, oh yeah, there's some sort of links to the military in Dishonored, and there's like some pistols from Dishonored are in the end of the game and stuff like that. It's not a particularly satisfying conclusion. A lot of the stuff is just like waved away by like, oh yeah, well it's just that's what the way it is. It feels like the mysteries themselves are way more interesting than the solutions. Like there's not some big payoff that makes it all worth it. And that means that the ending just kind of falls flat. Like you get to the ending, I feel like you start the game thinking like really, really early on, and because it's in the advertising as well, oh, I've got to kill these visionaries. I've got to kill all of these visionaries, and then when I get to the end of the game, I'll be able to kill all of them in one day, and then that'll be the end of the game. And like I said, I spent the whole first half of the game hoping that would change, hoping something would like throw a spanner in the works and change things up. It doesn't. The last day, you go and kill all of the visionaries, then you end the game. That's it. There are multiple endings, but really, like, they're not interesting at all. They're just exactly what you'd expect. There's no big surprises. Like, the biggest surprise, I think, is meant to be the idea that Juliana's your daughter. And there's a couple of things about like Colt's history and how long Colt's been in the loops and stuff like that. But none of that is like an interesting solution. None of it's like a real shocking moment. It's just kind of like, oh, well, that's weird. And then you move on. And it means that, like, the game ends exactly as you'd expect it to end, right from the beginning. Like, all of the sort of story things that get revealed to you end up not really mattering, not really changing the sort of trajectory of the story. And when you get to the end, there's like actually a little thank you note from the developers. It's sort of like saying, thank you for completing the game, thank you for playing it. And part of me felt like that was a bit weird. It's almost like they knew that the story was going to be anticlimactic, so they feel like they had to put something in at the end to be like, you know, sort of talk to the player directly. It felt a little bit strange. It definitely felt like they had an idea for the gameplay, and then they didn't have a very good idea for kind of how to make that into a narrative, how to build that into a kind of interesting narrative. So, in conclusion, and I know this has been going on for a while, and I think these rambling reviews, like I said, they're rambling. They will go on for a while. In conclusion, I think Deathloop is a fine game. Like, it's an alright game. It's interesting. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Dishonored or Prey, like either of the Dishonored games or Prey. I think it's kind of an interesting little curiosity. I always like it when developers do a new IP and they try something new, but this feels like a step back from the previous things that the developer's done, which is a shame. And I definitely don't feel like it delivers on the original promise, on the sort of hype for the game. I think the all of the stuff that was hyped up is kind of something that you will experience very early on in this game, and then after that it doesn't really ever progress from there. It doesn't ever get more interesting. It doesn't ever change in any way. It doesn't make it that sort of thing. The sort of thing that I would expect from a 10 out of 10 game is for it to be like surprising and it to be like absolutely perfecting the gameplay elements, and I don't think this game does that at all. So overall, I'm going to give it 7 out of 10. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Like I said, let me know in the comments what other games you'd like to hear me talking about, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.